Hi, everybody. Just a little bit of housekeeping that we need to do every time we have a gathering here in the auditorium space. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming. We are very pleased to have this happening in our auditorium here at the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. We ask that you please silence or turn off your cell phone. In the event of an emergency, please follow instructions to exit the auditorium. Exits are located at the back of the auditorium through the wooden doors. That's probably how all of you came in. You would go straight out of the building through the glass doors and you will be on Clinton Street. To your right, there is a set of double doors and then a second set of gray doors. That exit takes you to Ellicott Street. Also, from the lobby, there is a staircase. You go back out the back again. There's a staircase to the right that brings you up to Washington Street and the main front entrance of the library. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Again, welcome. My name is Maria Dautruche, and I serve as the external advisor to the New York State Commission on African American History. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here to this, the Commission's 4th public meeting. This commission is chaired by the Secretary of State, Robert Rodriguez. Secretary Rodriguez is a uniquely accomplished leader and former legislator with civic and legislative successes that have been focused strategically on investing in and developing public good infrastructure projects, creating good-paying jobs, and addressing financial disparities for historically underrepresented minorities and low-income communities. Please join me in welcoming the chair of the Commission on African American History and our 68th Secretary of State to the podium to provide brief remarks. Secretary Robert Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be serving as Governor Hochul's chairperson to this very prestigious commission, the New York State Commission on African American History. We are so excited to be bringing the commission here to Buffalo. We know that the roots of African American heritage run deep in Western New York. The history here is rich, vibrant, and alive, which is why we feel it's important to make sure that this community has input in the commission's report. Yet another reason why we're bringing the commission to Buffalo was so important. We recognize that the city of Buffalo experienced a devastating tragedy last year, the effects of which are still being felt by the community today. And it's a way for us not only to show support for this community, but to honor those that we lost and ensure that their memories remain a part of the city and the state's history as we continue our fight for a more inclusive and just society. Tonight's theme for the meeting could not be more appropriate: looking back while moving forward. So for this meeting, the commission has partnered with the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor, which, as you know, is a nationally and internationally recognized Buffalo neighborhood that offers residents and visitors alike the opportunity to learn about the region's rich history. And just a short time ago, we were provided with an inspiring virtual tour, sorry for the rain, of some of the historic landmarks in the surrounding area. But we also want to point out that in the lobby are wonderful exhibits of some of these locations, including the Color Musicians Club, which was founded in 1917 by a group of talented jazz players who were discriminated against due to the color of their skin, and the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor, who's out there as well. So I urge you to stop by and learn all about their inspiring journey and the work that they've been doing for so long. Now, before we begin, I'd like to thank the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library for hosting us this evening. And a warm shout out to the staff for all their work behind the scenes to make this organize this event. And we also certainly want to thank all the members of the commission for volunteering their time, traveling, and being here with them, and their service on this commission. Now, joining us this evening are Commissioner Dr. Hazel Dukes, who serves as the commission's vice chair, and Commissioners Dr. Ann Bailey, Dr. Kishi Ducree, Dr. Malik Small, and Buffalo's own Dr. Henry Taylor and Dr. John Torrey. Please rise, commissioners, that way folks can recognize your contributions. and the work that you have done and the work that is still lies ahead. I also want to acknowledge the presence of colleagues in government. Assembly Member and Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who we'll hear from a little bit later. Of course, Mayor Byron Brown, who we will hear from shortly. Assembly Member Karen McMahon, and Assembly Member Monica Wallace. Lockport Mayor Michelle Roman could not be with us due to unfortunate events that she's dealing with, but her presence is certainly noted, and a representative from State Senator Sean Ryan's office. So, the meeting will now come to order. And just by way of reference, last year by executive order, Governor Hochul announced the creation of the New York State Commission on African American History. And just to share with you our purpose, it's to strategize, brainstorm, and ultimately present ideas that recognize the full histories, the rich legacies, and the cultural contributions made by African Americans and Black New Yorkers to our state and to our nation in spite of the various barriers, obstacles, and persecutions that they had faced. So this commission is comprised of highly accomplished and dedicated public servants and who is gathering over this year to decide how we ensure that New Yorkers have a better understanding of our shared history, and to ensure that African Americans and Black New Yorkers are uplifted and recognized for their enormous beneficial impacts on the health, economic prosperity, public safety, and general welfare of all New Yorkers. And we do this by very specifically partnering with community-based organizations and by bringing New Yorkers into the conversation through events, cultural programming, scholarly research, and other activities. And it's a recognition that we know has taken far too long, and I want to thank the governor for making this a priority as we strive for a more inclusive future. But one thing has not changed, and that's the need to draw inspiration and guidance from our past. To build this future, we must know our past and draw inspiration and guidance as we work towards building this inclusive present and future. So without further ado, I want to just open up this very important and powerful and meaningful exchange of ideas that we will hear from later through our panel discussion, and then we will have a public comment period where we will hear from you, the members of the public. But before we get to that hard work, I want to make sure that we receive our greetings from an incredible role model for not just the African American community, but for what he has done for the city of Buffalo. He has been a true leader at re-energizing, reinvigorating, and transforming Buffalo to a place that is truly inclusive and diverse, but stays true to its roots as the City of Lights. So with that, I want to introduce Mayor Byron Brown.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Secretary of State Rodney Rodriguez, and thank you for chairing this critically important commission. I want to, and I said that wrong, I said Rodney, I meant Robert. I know a Rodney Rodriguez. I want to thank you for your work in chairing this very important commission. I want to also thank the New York State commissioners that are here for the critically important work that you will be doing. I want to again recognize Commissioner Hazel Dukes, who is also the state president of the NAACP, and thank her for her long service to our state and to our nation, and her long fight for the recognition of African American and Black history. Let's give her a round of applause. I also want to recognize the president of the Buffalo branch of the NAACP, Reverend Mark E. Blue. And I have to say a huge thank you to Governor Hochul for establishing the commission and for her continued strong support of cultural diversity and her dedication to preserving African American history and Black history in our great state. I'd also like to recognize my colleague in government, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who worked to develop the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. And we are very blessed in Buffalo to have a rich legacy of African American and Black history. And there have recently been significant investments into the corridor from Governor Hochul, from Assemblymember Peoples-Stokes, and soon you will hear of some additional investments from the city of Buffalo. Let's give our Assembly Majority Leader a round of applause. And Secretary of State Rodriguez mentioned the partnership tonight with the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. I want to thank them for all their work to preserve the African American history that exists here in our great city. Their chairwoman, Lily Wiley Upshaw, could not be with us this evening. Lily lost her mom. Her mom passed away recently, and just want to mention that she remains in our thoughts and prayers, as well as her family. African American history is at the core of American history. That's why it's so important to recognize and honor the rich contributions of African Americans and Black Americans here in Buffalo, Western New York, across our state and our nation. We are certainly standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. It's because of them and the sacrifices that they have made that we are all able to gather here in this place today. I am grateful to our foreparents who persevered in the face of slavery, racism, discrimination, and many other hardships. We are still battling many of those ills today. The New York State Commission on African American History is a powerful way for us to have a better understanding of the richness of African American and Black history. And we are doing this at a time, and it's important to note this, when many places in this nation are going the wrong way in studying history and understanding history. In fact, there are some places that are trying to erase history and trying to stop young people from even being able to read about history. Not here in New York State. So yes, thank you. So again, I thank our governor for her leadership, and I thank all of the commissioners that have been appointed for the important work that you are doing. This is the 4th meeting. I am very pleased as mayor to welcome you to Buffalo, New York, and it is an honor to have the commission here in our city. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. It's my honor now to introduce one of my former colleagues, but certainly a friend and a mentor, Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who has been a true pioneer when we talk about the Michigan Street Corridor. She was fighting this battle to get that recognized in 2007. And we are still in that battle today, but we are expanding on that view and on that mission by looking at all the communities and looking at African American history. But it is through that example that we are here today and building upon that work. So I just want to introduce Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes.
Good evening. It's really good to see you all here. This is probably one of the most important topics going on being discussed in the great city of Buffalo today. We were earlier this morning having a ribbon cutting for the new AKG Art Gallery, which is phenomenal. And if those of you who are not from Buffalo, please take an opportunity to run through and see that as well. But I'm honored to be here. I will add my comments to the mayors as it relates to elected officials that are in the room. We appreciate you. Certainly want to honor Governor Hochul for she's leaning into the history that's important, the history that created this country. I tell people this often, and I'm not ashamed of any of it. And as a matter of fact, I'm very proud of it. I'm literally the four generations away from a woman under the bottom of a ship who had no idea where she was coming. She was abused. Her children were taken. They weren't allowed to read. Her husband was taken. The families were separated on a regular basis. But I'm still here. And I'm proud of that. And I don't think people should run away from that history. I think they should run into it because it strengthens you. It allows you to understand that, wow, if she did that, she didn't even know where she was coming to or what was going to be expected of her. But she made it, and because she made it, I made it. And because I made it, I have to make sure that other people realize what their possibilities are. So it was a labor of love in 2007 when we created that language to create the Heritage Quarter. It was a labor of love that took a long time to visualize, to realize, but it's worth every effort, every struggle, every difficult conversation, every hard time we had finding resources, every difficulty we had in finding the right person to lead in this great effort. And so for us to have finally gotten there with these multiple pieces of Buffalo Black history is just so important. It's more important than most people think. People talk a lot about great new shiny museums. Well, I think that there's huge value in museums in period buildings. I mean, I don't think we should be tearing down anything else in Buffalo, and neither did the Management Commission. Museums can be put together in many ways. I do, want to honor Hazel Dukes for even being here. I call her the Queen Mother of the whole state. So I don't care what comes up. The Queen Mother is always around, and I'm grateful for her presence. I'm certainly pleased to meet the other commissioners that are here. You have yeoman's work ahead of you, but I have no doubt that you're going to get it done. One, because Hazel's she's going to make sure it gets done. But two, because I know, the best people from around the state were selected in this role, and I am very proud of you. I'm very proud that you're in your fourth meeting. I definitely look forward to the results of your research, of your study, for the results of how you're going to figure out how to remind people and include people in the fact that Black history is American history. Because honestly, we built this country. We built every part of it. We built New York State. There's not many buildings standing that were built back then that we were not working. Now, maybe we were not being paid, but we did the work. And because we built this country so strong and so vibrant, that we are Americans. We are Americans, and if we had not built this country in the fashion that we did, the brand new people who come here on a regular basis would not want to be here. They want to be here because we built something that was strong and vibrant, and no matter how we were denigrated, we still kept standing. No matter how we were abused, we still kept standing. No matter what was taken from us, we still kept going. And because we kept going, we created a country that other people want to not only come and visit, but they want to be Americans. And so there's a lot to be proud about what we contributed. And I think I'm so happy that we're leaning into it in a way that is informative to the rest of the nation. I'll have my comments to the mayors on how disturbing it is that there's so many people who think that they can move themselves forward by trying to hold us back. You don't even want people to read anymore. By the way, that woman who came here with her kids 4 decades ago, they wouldn't let her read either, wouldn't allow her to speak her own language. And we're going back to that in some places. We're going the right way in New York. And I'm so proud to be a New Yorker. I want to thank Robert for bringing this whole commission here. I want to thank the governor for her work on this, because this was not a 4-hour debate on the floor of the legislature trying to pass. This was by executive order. That means a lot. That means that it's going to happen. She's committed to it. You all are committed to it. The community is committed to it. So let's go. Let's go. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Peoples-Stokes, for your remarks and for your leadership, and for being with us at this meeting today. We will now hear from Buffalo's first poet laureate, Jillian Haynesworth. Born and raised in Buffalo's East Side, Jillian began writing poetry at a young age, just 7. Jillian earned her bachelor's in criminal justice and law, focusing on reform. In January 2017, Jillian recommitted herself to social change through art, thus her poetry career really began. Since then, she has performed all over, not just here in Buffalo, other cities, internationally. She has let her passion lead her mission and empower listeners to take part in demanding and creating systemic change. She loves and lives for the community and exemplifies that in all she does. Please join me in giving a round of applause for her as she comes to the podium and offers 2 poems for us during this meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Always honored to be invited. We know how important history is, preserving our history, honoring those who laid the foundation for where we are now. So anytime I get to stand up in front of my own community and acknowledge our work, where we've come from, where we have to go, I will always jump on that, and I'm very honored to be here. So I'm gonna do a couple poems. This first one is called Water. I wrote this poem after the May 14th attack at TOPS. It currently stands in TOPS as the memorial piece. So this is Water. Let the hopeful healing waters flow, ushering in a rebirth of our sense of self. Let the flowing waters remind us of time, current yet fleeting like life itself, large yet within reach, just as the ancestors. Let the hopeful healing waters flow, cleansing all pain and fear, all hurt and regret. Let the water heal our people, reminding us that even our small marks on this huge world are necessary. Let the hopeful healing waters flow. Let the water tell the stories of those who came before us, those who fought and believed for us, those with the strength and power of a high tide, those with the meekness of a still pond. Let the beauty of the unknown offer comfort and hope, for within water, there will always be life. Thank you. I'm actually really bad at stand kind of podium, so I'm gonna come up here. I'm gonna do a poem called Little Black Boy. If you've heard me perform, you've probably heard this piece before. It is the piece that got me started in this work, and it's the first piece that came to mind when I was invited to perform today. So this is Little Black Boy. I wish the little black boy did something wrong. I wish the police yelled, "Freeze!" and the little black boy came barreling at him, aiming a gun at ease, actually life-threatening. So when the cops have to fight and the bullets take flight, no one has to hide and no one has to lie, because the little black boy did something wrong this time. I wish the video of the incident leaked on Facebook and the whole world tuned in to get a better look, and we could all collectively say, yeah, that stinks, but he had it coming all along, because this time the little black boy did something wrong. I wish I could watch it on TV with my nephews and say, you see what he just did? That's something you should never do. Because it's easier to explain why he's laying dead in the street, bullet wounds still steaming from the lead and the heat, than to say no justice, no peace, or RIP when the little black boy did nothing wrong. And it's easier to explain what's wrong and what's right, what's black and what's white, and the in-between where gray lies. And it's easier to mourn the loss of someone, a mother burying her son when we can look at her and say, I'm so sorry, Mama, but this time your little black boy was wrong. Black Lives Matter is not a badge of honor. It's not a hate group. It's a message to our youth. It's a reminder saying you mean something in a world where if you go 10 miles over the speed limit, they might try to kill you. And I am so sick of saying, put the guns down, little black boys. The right to bear arms doesn't apply to you. And if your jeans are too baggy, or your voice is too loud, or you know your rights, or you live on the good side of town, or you live in the hood, or your job is too good, or your car is too nice, or your skin ain't light, or your money is too long, or your personality is too strong, be careful out there, because you might be gone, even if you're a little black boy who did nothing wrong. And in case you haven't noticed, we're still singing that same song. See, we've always been chosen when it was time for the killing, the way you choose a tomato that's ripe for the picking. I thought targets were red. When did they become black? I thought the abuse of power was dead. When did it come back? And maybe it never left. But when did it get this bad? When did the allure of equality make us wave the white flag? We've always protested the killings. We marched when Dr. King had a dream. He preached a message of freedom, and we believed everything. We looked to the hills with hope of free and better days, but we didn't notice that we were still targets, just targets in different ways. They didn't kill us as much, but we were still their slaves. And they used systematic oppression instead of whips and chains. They compared us to each other like some were better, not the same. Like we were not stuck on the same boat, like we didn't get here the same way. They locked us in cells and they threw the keys away. They left us broke in the hood. They didn't even need a grave. They sent us to the schools that were falling apart. When we finally found our leaders, they stabbed us in the heart. They sicked their dogs on us and hung us from trees. They made it very clear that we were never really free. You see, we drank from different fountains, success with different tools. We used the back door, we followed different rules. We were taught we were different, and that different ain't right. That's why to this day, speaking proper is speaking white, but as our standards rose, their fears grew. They were stunned when we sat at that counter singing, we should not be moved. And they were afraid when Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus, and when a white man wanted her seat, she refused to get up. They panicked when Malcolm X gathered a group of his brothers. When we policed the police, it made life safer for each other. And when Angela Davis proclaimed, we ain't scared no more, we gave the ones who wanted us afraid a new goal to reach for. They realized they couldn't kill our spirits. They couldn't kill our souls. They couldn't kill our minds. They couldn't kill our hope. So they targeted our black boys who did nothing wrong, and they killed them for wearing hoodies and playing with toy guns. They choked them for selling Lucy's, ignored the I can't breathe, and they didn't get in trouble. They seemed to walk away scot-free, but we can't let them get away with anything. So while they target us as individuals, we have to build our team. We have to show our youth that they are worth something and teach them to aspire for more than a pair of Jordans and some bling. When you know better, you do better. So allow me to preach. There is nothing we can't do. There is no goal beyond our reach. We are culture creators. They want to be like us. Match our style, match our swag, and it's still not dope enough. They will try to keep us down and they will continue to be mad, so let us be great. Ignore the hate. As a matter of fact, they should target that. Thank you.
I'm not even gonna bother looking up who my hometown poet laureate is. I don't know. Might just adopt Buffalo as a second home and get a little claim of Jillian Hainsworth. Another round for her, please. Thank you for sharing your gifts with us and your message. It's now my honor, well, I keep saying it's my honor, but y'all, if y'all are praying people, please pray for me in this panel, because I could listen to each of them talk for 4 hours at a time. But I promise you this panel will only take 40 minutes. So consider it a spark. It's my honor to introduce our panel and these panelists for this evening, aligned with this meeting's theme, which is looking back while moving forward. This to highlight historic contributions that are often overlooked by Africans and Black Americans and African Americans to our state and nation. This panel will explore both the significant impact of and lessons to be learned today from Black Buffalo's rich heritage and history. As I call the names of the panelists, I invite you to come up and take your seat at the table. I will move to make that more accessible for us. And I will not read full bios. We're in Buffalo, and for those of us viewing live stream. We'll be sure to make sure full bios are available on the commission's website soon. But I'll just do quick introductions now. First, we have one of our commissioners, Dr. Henry Taylor, a professor in the Department of Urban Planning and Regional Planning at the University of Buffalo, where he also serves as coordinator of the Neighborhood Planning and Community Development Specialization in the School of Architecture and Planning, and founding director, of the Center for Urban Studies, Dr. Henry Taylor. Solving problems. Next, we have Dr. Lillian S. Williams, Associate Professor and former Chair of the Department of African American Studies at the University at Buffalo. She also serves on the Board of Directors of the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor, where she is the Education Chair. Dr. Williams is also author of Strangers in the Land of Paradise, The Creation of an African American Community, Buffalo, New York, 1900 to 1940. Welcome, Dr. Lillian Williams. Next up, we have Naila Ansari, Buffalo native and assistant professor at SUNY Buffalo State University in Theater and Africana Studies. Her research and performance project, The Movement of Joy, archives stories of Black women's joy across the country. Naila is also dance director at Ujima Company Incorporated. And welcome now, Naila Ansari. Last but not least, because someone must come last, is another commissioner, Dr. John Torrey, an assistant professor of philosophy and a contributing professor in the Africana Studies unit at SUNY Buffalo State. As part of his work as a public philosopher, he was appointed in 2020 to Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown's commission to recommend police policy and advance social reconstruction, and he was selected to the Board of Ethics for the City of Buffalo in 2020. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner and Dr. John Torrey. Okay, so why don't you move on down, Dr. Torrey? I'm gonna hang there. Yeah, I'm gonna hang there. I think everyone, there are enough mics for all of us, and I'll take care of Mike Olympics. And looking at Avi in the back, I think it'll work if I move over, and it's working. Okay. So we're gonna jump right in the interest of time, of course, always time as a construct that we're bound by. But I asked each of you as we were preparing for the panel to think of someone from Black Buffalo's rich history that one just stands out to you as someone who made an impact, might have contributed to the work you do, and also maybe someone you think folks in Buffalo or even outside of this region may not know enough about. So let's start with Dr. Taylor.
It wasn't an easy task reaching across time to find a single individual that I would want to talk about that I think has played an important and significant role in the development of our city. There were many people that could fit that category, including people like William Gator. But I thought of Dr. Monroe Fordham. The reason I selected Monroe was because he understood the power of history. That history was not only a story about the building of our communities, about the rise of certain people to positions of power and fame, contributions, but most important and significantly, history was a story about our fight for liberation and freedom, the struggles we waged, the victory we won, the processes that we followed in terms of building community. Now, Monroe understood that much of this history were locked in places that were obscure and difficult to find and reach. And he made a commitment to gather that history, to create organizations and institutions that would preserve it and make it available. I remember one time going by his house when he was a student in the, or just getting started, and the house had very little furniture in it. And in the middle of the living room was this huge microfilm machine where he could duplicate papers and materials. And that reflected his interest in the preservation of this history, so that other scholars like us would have it to develop insights into that past. And I think Buffalo is in a much better place because of the history he has preserved and because of the institutions that he has built to develop and present that history. And I'll stop for there.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Want y'all to know that was about exactly 2 minutes. And that's about how much time we're going to set the standard there. Dr. Williams, share with us a story, please.
Well, I share the same sentiments as Henry does in regard to Monroe Fordham and the founding of the African American Historical Association of the Niagara Frontier. It was fundamental. We were graduate students and we realized how essential it was to preserve records and to identify those persons who were instrumental in fighting for liberty for African Americans. So the person whom I'd like to highlight this evening is Mary Burnett Talbert. Mary Burnett Talbert was a suffragist, human rights activist, and basically a jack of all trades. She founded school systems for kindergartners at her church, the Michigan Avenue Baptist Church. She trained Sunday school teachers so that they would be equipped to teach not only in the Sunday schools, but beyond that, should occupations open up for African American women. But she also was instrumental in fighting for human rights. She was one of the members of the board of directors of the NAACP. In fact, when she served on the board as vice president, it was she who headed the anti-lynching campaign to get the Dyer Amendment to make lynching a federal crime enacted. But she was also involved in the club movement. The Phyllis Wheatley Club, for example, founded in Buffalo in 1899, was one of those organizations that focused upon liberating African Americans. So Talbert was there. She later became president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. There she was instrumental in preserving Frederick Douglass's estate in Washington, D.C., and making it a historic landmark. Today, it's operated under the auspices of the National Park Service, and it's because of Mary Talbert's efforts that this is indeed the case. She contended, she wanted to know, make certain that youth knew who had fought for their liberty. So Douglass was a guiding star for them. I have more time on my... That's good. Okay.
Y'all go look up Mary Talbert if you want to know more. Okay.
Can I just say one other
Yes,
thing?
please.
I have to tell you that I've made arrangements to have a marker honoring Mary Talbert placed at her home, the last home that she owned in Buffalo, which is 116 to 118 Northland. That monument will be basically a Pomeroy marker, will be installed sometime in the next few months. We're hoping to have it installed on her birthday, which is September 17th.
Thank you, that's good to know. These efforts to put a marker down and not forget. We'll move on to Naila Ansari.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Naila Ansari. Thank you for having me. So I have a lot of Black women in my family that are amazing and have been a lot of firsts. So this was very difficult for me. So I will have to call some names out before I say the person that I chose, which is my mother, Dr. Levon Ansari, my aunt, Dr. Muriel A. Howard, and my aunt, Dr. Rhonda Averitz, who passed away. So I have to give honor to them because they have given me a lot of strength to be here and to become the leader that I'm becoming today. But today I wanted to focus on Lorna C. Hill, who was my mentor. And as a theater artist, activist, she taught me a lot. I was the first person on stage, my lines was the color marching band is coming. The color marching band is coming. Didn't know what I was saying at the time, but I did it. And she gave me the strength to really push forward. And one thing she said when she passed away before she asked me to be the dance director for Ujima was always do everything with love and justice. And I didn't understand her story and how much she fought, because for those of you in the audience, I know Lorna, she did not play. She said whatever she wanted to say, and she didn't care who was in the room, and she said it righteously, and she said it with love and with justice. And when I found out that she was the first black woman, period, to get accepted into Dartmouth, go to Dartmouth with very elite white men, I couldn't even imagine what that struggle was like. And then she took that and the stories that she told and she brought to Buffalo every single day to fight for love and justice is something that I try to honor in my own work. And she's passed now for 2 years, but she's had Ujima Company for 45 years with very little money. And so now that I'm kind of behind the tables, producing, directing, I now honor her for the fact that she can put on the amount of shows and train the amount of artists that she did and activists with very little to nothing. So I honor Lorna C. Hill today.
Ashe on that, and on bringing in the names of other elders and ancestors who are always with us. Thank you, Naila. Dr. John Tory, who have you selected?
I almost said president. I feel like I was getting called on. I have Arthur O. Eve. So as everyone here has mentioned, there are a lot of wonderful and impactful Black history names from Buffalo that have done work, whether it's local, across the state, or nationally. And as someone in education, Arthur Eve's work actually speaks a lot to me. And so I want to give just a bit of background before I get to why I'm excited to speak about him. I want to give some more background on just all the work he's been able to do in his career. So he was elected to the New York State Assembly in 1966. He was deputy speaker in 1979, and he held that position until his retirement, which meant that he was the highest ranking African American in the state legislature from when he gained deputy speakership until his retirement. During his tenure, he was able to fight for policies that helped to allow Black and other minority groups gain access to things like state construction bids and be able to get get access to construction jobs, be able to work in the kinds of projects that are developing across the entire state in the 70s and the 80s. That's access for resources, that's access for income, and that's something he wanted to try to widen out as part of his policies. But he was also a bit of an activist, and that's something I appreciate. So during the Attica Uprising, he was one of the few people who was allowed to actually give demands and be a discussion broker for the inmates who were having their uprising, which was a unique post for an assemblyman, to say the least. He was also someone who tried to broker discussions during the Buffalo riots in 1967, during our own version of the Long Hard Summer of '67. And I guess for me, the big thing that he was able to do is create the Higher Education Opportunity Program, the EOP program that he was famous for. So since the 1970s, in his first term as assemblyman, he was active trying to get about $500,000 to fund a program to help lower income, first generation, the kinds of students who I get to get at Buff State, the kinds of students who need this kind of resources across the state. They were able to get a partnership with SUNY, and so now over 50 schools for over 50 years, we've seen generations of students be able to have funding, support, access, and resources because of the work of Arthur Eve. And so, again, as a professor, I'm indebted to him and to the folks who helped provide that this resource, so that I still have students to teach who are excited to learn, who want to take on that opportunity, and we now have more resources to cover them and help shepherd them so that they can take advantage of educational opportunities successfully.
Thank you. Thank you for all those responses. And, you know, coming from each of you mentioned, this was a little harder to kind of think of just one, or to, you know, so there's a plethora and there's a lot of different ways to think about impact. And so, Dr. Williams, I direct this question to you because I read an interview that you gave where you talked about perhaps being in graduate school or something, and some professor, you know, kind of making the assertion that there kind of wasn't a lot of Black Buffalo history to dig into. And you asserted in response, oh yes, there is. And you went on and with others, you founded the African American Historical Association of the Niagara Frontier and became associate editor of its journal, Afro Americans in New York Life. And I'm just curious if you could tell us how you came into that classroom where the professor is holding some authority, if not power, and could confidently say, no, there's history there, and where did you get that history from? And how can we ensure future generations, not even at the higher education level, but students going to K through 12 school in Buffalo today, how do we ensure that they have that kind of confidence and knowledge about their own history here in the city?
I think the first thing was my father told me that I would always have a roof over my head and food on my table. So I was confident that I could succeed regardless. But also, at that time, there were amazing graduate students that came to the University of Buffalo's history department. The second year that I was the first African American in ages who had been admitted to the doctoral program, but I was soon joined by Monroe Fordham and Ralph Watkins. And we were all, interestingly enough, teachers. We had begun our professional careers as high school teachers. It was in the 60s, and activities were taking place across the country, and it was important for us to recount our history, because again, it's cliche, but not to know one's history, one becomes condemned to repeat it. So we all wanted to do research projects for our PhD dissertations on aspects of African American history, and specifically Buffalo's African American history. And we were discouraged because, quote unquote, there weren't resources available for us to actually complete those projects. But we knew almost intuitively that the papers, the primary sources did exist. They were held in private homes. And we knew that. Our experiences, for example, had taught us that when we went to the repositories, there weren't any records. In fact, I can cite an example. One summer, I was working as an assistant in the African American Studies Teaching Institute at Columbia. And the professor who led that institute, I wanted to know about my research interests, and I told him I was interested in doing history of late populations, essentially. And he suggested that I go to the oral history section of Columbia. So when I went, I told the person that I was interested in their oral history program. I didn't know what their focus had been, and he asked me whom I was interested in. The woman was a domestic. His response to me was, why would we be interested in her? So essentially, the records of African Americans had not been collected, but we who founded the Afro American Historical Association began to collect records, and now we have 70+ collections. We have oral histories as well as primary sources, institutional records like the Michigan Avenue YMCA, for example, and a number of church records.
That's amazing. And where are all these held today? Can people access them?
Yes. These records are located in several places. They are located in the Monroe Fordham Center at Buffalo State University. They're also located at the library, Meriwether Library downtown. And I've begun to have the University of Buffalo digitize some records, so they are located there too. For example, the Michigan Avenue YMCA papers are at the University of Buffalo. And just recently, the University of Buffalo's archives digitized the records of St. Philip's Episcopal Church.
Thank you. That's such important work. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn it to you, Dr. Taylor, as we think about the history specifically here in this region. And I know that during the summer of 2021, the Buffalo Health Equity Center asked the UB Center for Urban Studies, which you direct, to answer the question, has Black Buffalo progressed since 1990? And a pause, because I always have to remind myself that 1990 is not 10 years ago, it's like 30 years ago. So just in case, in case I'm not the only one, like, has Black Buffalo progressed over the past 30 years? And you took this on and produced a report. And something that struck me was a finding in your report that the median income for Black people in Buffalo had not increased in 30 years. And in your opinion, what is just one, though we know there are many, but just one proposed solution to this one finding in that report?
The first thing I want to say in response to that was I was fortunate enough when I first came to Buffalo back in 1988 to engage in probably one of the most comprehensive studies of the Black community that had ever been done. So for me, that study represented a reference point. And 30 years later, we wanted to look back to see had any progress been made. And the answer was no. The long and the short of it centered around the failure to develop comprehensive, integrated plans to redevelop the African American community. Those plans simply did not exist, and no one made any effort to do it. Most significantly, they made no effort to create the type of innovative training program connected to real economic development opportunities that could have, in fact, made a difference. We knew that the city was being transformed from an industrial to a knowledge-based economy. 30 years ago, we were saying to folks, if you take 10-year-olds and begin to prepare and train them for the jobs that are coming, there are going to be abundance of jobs in construction industry and construction-related work. Those jobs will exist because construction in a variety of different forms is essential when you move from one form of an economy to another. But the bottom line was that there was no interest in creating opportunities for African Americans from moving from one position in the economy to the other. And one of the reasons that we found out in that study was simple, that we've been told that in this new economy, the vast majority of good jobs required a college education. And that isn't true. 70% of the jobs in Buffalo and Erie County require only a high school diploma. But we discovered that those jobs existed in two categories: high-skill, high-paid jobs, and low-skill, low-paid jobs. And those low-skill jobs did require skills. African Americans were systematically, intentionally, and deliberately concentrated in the low-skill, low-paid jobs. White workers with a high school diploma were concentrated in the high-skilled jobs and positions. So they got the high-income positions in Buffalo and Erie County. Right now, the vast majority of Buffalo suburbs, over 70 to 80% of them, are dominated by whites with only a high school diploma. Reality. So the fact that the median household income did not rise was a direct and intentional process of a system of racialized oppression that deliberately locked blacks into low-income jobs and positions. They were able to be maintained in those areas because of the failure of the leadership to develop job training programs that connected on-the-job training as a critical way of teaching people new skills. I'll stop for that.
Oh, don't take my movement for minutes, but also, yeah, that was good. And so, and this I do offer, I'm looking at Dr. Williams, but also Dr. Taylor. I would open it back up if you had additional maybe 2-minute remarks on that. Dr. Williams, I'm thinking about in your role and in the work, that we see happening at the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. And that's supposed to be an economic engine. in a lot of ways. In addition to maintaining and preserving history and culture, there's a lot of intentionality around redeveloping and reinvesting in that corridor to be an economic engine. Can you speak a bit about some of the strategies that the corridor is implementing or thinking about? Because we know they're still new and starting out there as well, to build this economically inclusive, diverse, and sustainable, thriving community, honestly, after years of divestment and underinvestment in that community.
Well, the Corridor Commission certainly has been focused upon creating opportunities within those boundaries. However, we have hired consultants to work on those projects, so I would prefer to talk about some of the history projects that we're engaging in. We have a major project underway now to create banners in the corridor, banners which will honor the medical professionals that worked in Buffalo over the last roughly century. And they will be hung on Michigan Avenue between Ferry Street and Goodell. So and it's a collaboration between Roswell Park and the commission.
Thank you for that, because that is also an important thing to lift up, particularly coming out of this pandemic that we've been through. So thank you for sharing that. And the commissioners did get a chance to hear similarly from the corridor staff that that this is something we have an opportunity, they have an opportunity to create and hopefully think of some innovative solutions and strategies that will get us actually to the progress and vision we have for this community. On that, I want to bring in Dr. Torrey, who has conversationally shared with me that some of the way he thinks about his work as a philosopher, a historian, is that he's trying to connect the way back past to the what happened yesterday, and what's a linger, what's an emergence, and there's a lot of time travel happening in the way you think about history there. So I'm just wondering, as you think about today's themes and really the conversation that's bubbling here and now, what are some connections from Buffalo's past that you find a direct connection to today, and again, toward this taking the lessons from that to do something different? Is anything resonating for you in that part of the conversation too?
Yeah, you know, Buffalo is, I suppose, unfortunately, another example of what happens in a lot of American cities, right? So some of the ills that black people have had to navigate here are the same sort of ills you'd find in Birmingham, Boston, or Berkeley, I suppose, right? Like if you choose your city, you're gonna find redlining, racial discrimination, low wages, no training for black people done purposely, folks being locked out of quality living and working and schooling environments. I take that to be a specific case in Buffalo because, well, we have a unique location at the end of the Underground Railroad. We've got a unique location because we're part of the Great Migration. So there's a unique history for how black people get here and what they're bringing here, and more importantly, perhaps what they're expecting when they do get here. I take that to be the same sort of concern we got right now, right? Populations are still moving around. People are trying to find good places to live, good places to raise their families, good places that they can be educated, and places that they can feel safe. And for many black communities across the country, we don't get to check all those boxes. That same issue is here in Buffalo. So when I think about what has happened in the past here and how that affects what we can do going forward, I tend to think about how can we respond to injustices in the past and how can we prevent those things from happening going forward. What kind of community works do we need to do in order to create the kinds of pipelines and policies and procedures so that people do feel safe, cared for, well taken care of, and like they have a genuine equal opportunity for success in their communities. I think the more we don't attune ourselves in our policies, in our discussions, in our community creations to those considerations, the more we are doomed to repeat the past, as Dr. Williams said. Like, we're not learning from the mistakes of what happens when we block out black communities, when we block out black economic centers, when we block out black spiritual centers, when we cordon off black communities to only be in one space and to receive one kind of job. We have a history now. We have 50 years being able to see what that provides. It's not much. So I do think part of what it is to move forward while looking back is to figure out what are the ills and the injustices, and to be explicit about trying to respond to them and prevent them from maintaining.
Thank you, thank you. And you said a word that I wasn't expecting, and it was expectations. Because now I'm thinking how, when I think of the Great Migration and the stories I've heard about those journeys, folks were definitely looking for more opportunities, better opportunities, specifically economic and safety, looking for good work, right? So they can earn money, take care of their families. And as I turn to Naila, I am curious in my own reflections, how many of our folks traveled expecting to find joy? And so that brings me to a question for you, because you've been studying this, and I don't want to pretend just because you've been studying joy that it's been a joyful journey for you. So I just want to help the audience deal with language that way too. But I'm really captivated by your work on joy, particularly for Black women. And so what has your research revealed about the role of joy and how that plays into the kind of contributions we make when we show up somewhere?
Well, it's interesting we talked about the Great Migration, because when we think of Black culture, a lot of it has been a major disconnect for us. And so I find that a lot when I talk and do these interviews on joy. I actually started Dr. Williams when I was in graduate school, researching Mary Talbert for a show, a Broadway workshop. And I got put on graduate assistant assignment in the archives, looking up Mary Talbert, and we're trying to figure out this character and who this Black woman was. And it was difficult because when you're trying to write a play and you're trying to be accurate, you're also trying to find a personality. And so a lot of the documents you see are very, white male driven. This is A, B, C, this is a news article, this is a court document. And so you're really trying to dig, and it's like, why do I have to dig so hard to find this Black woman in her joy? Why does this have to be such a struggle? Like years, I'm telling you, years that Dr. Williams has really dived deep into the archive. And so for me, I'm like, this shouldn't be this difficult. I shouldn't have to see everything in like a massive amount of years to figure out one personality. And so I created a space where I asked the questions, 3 questions: what is joy? When did you discover joy? And when did joy discover you? And in that, I asked them to pick their favorite song and dance to it. So a lot of times when we think of Black culture, particularly of the Great Migration, we also left a lot of culture. Right, we do second lines, we don't have second lines here. It's like, you bring it up, a second line in New York. I've actually brought my friend that's a grand marshal here. People are like, what's the second line? I'm like, oh Lord, we gotta go all the way back to where we come from. But that's our space of Black joy, which is the oral traditions, which is the music, which is the dance, which is the story, which is the history, which is the storytelling that we've always done. And in theater and dance and performing arts and now television film, we have an opportunity to do that, but it's so skewed to a specific type of way. So for me, I'm like, how do I figure out how to do this? And how do I go to my elders to try to figure out the answer? And so when I was going to all these Black women in the community, I was asking them, well, when did you discover joy? And there was always this immediate silence. I'm like, oh, well, you don't know either. Because it's not a question that we talk about, because we're always doing something else. We're always trying to survive. We're always trying to figure it out. And so within these interviews that I've now been blessed to go around the country and do, I've noticed that joy happens in 4 places: play, resistance as resilience, community, and self. But with Black women, overwhelmingly, it is in community. It is of service to others, which may not be a problem until you don't serve yourself. And so when we talk about Black joy, particularly Black women joy, we have to understand that it's also a legacy that has really been erased for us, right? And that Great Migration, particularly for New Yorkers, and what I've noticed, particularly when I've interviewed women in the South, there is a difference. We don't necessarily always have that community space of art, because there's a big divestment in art. It's a struggle now just to get money for shows, but everybody wants to see it. Everyone wants to see a Black actor. Everybody wants to see Black singers. Everybody wants their talent, but we don't want to invest in that. But part of that is also investing in the joy and understanding what that looks like without having to serve other people. And so the work that I've been doing has been an eye-opener for me, because I'm still trying to discover what that joy is, but I'm also recognizing that Black women are also trying to figure out what that is, more in the space of play, less in the space of resilience and community.
I was just thinking as I listened, Mary Talbert died at age 57. She was serving people for most of her life, essentially. And she's honored, with hospitals named after her, schools named after her, fraternal and benevolent organizations. But where was the joy for her? And her papers, unfortunately, don't tell us that.
Yeah, that was the hardest research project ever. I was like, I need you to get something. I'm like, I'm not getting anything.
I can only imagine, and just many thoughts going through my mind. In the interest of time, I'll just say the connection for me is hearing so much about the richness, just in volume, of the Nash papers at the Nash House Museum, and just thinking about like wanting to go home and find my mother's diary and hoping that within there might be some joy, might be some solutions for me. Yes, Dr. Toy.
Well, just to make a pitch for the wonderful Monroe Fordham archive at
Very
Buffalo
good.
State University, where you can see the Nash papers and work from Dr. Monroe Fordham and plenty of other wonderful Black history artifacts from Western New York. It's the business repository in Western New York of Black history info.
Brought to you by, I know there's no commercial, but that was a good plug. I'm gonna turn it back to Dr. Taylor, and we are winding down. We've done amazing on time. Y'all have been so great, because the planning call was richer than this. I wish I recorded it, but it was great. But this is also very, very juicy, very good. You know, Commissioner Taylor, and I'm specifically addressing you as commissioner because you wear several hats, and one of them is being on this commission. And I'm just very curious at this point in the conversation and in the journey you've been on as a commissioner, what significant difference do you hope that the work you're doing on the commission and that all the commissioners are doing together will make, not only to the state, but also specifically here in this region?
I'll answer that by saying the most significant thing that I've learned as a historian. And I want to stress that I didn't become a historian to earn a living. I was already earning a living. I was a clinical audiologist. I became a historian to find answers to the questions of why African American people were living in these underdeveloped neighborhoods and communities. I wanted to understand what were the particular social and economic forces that continually reproduced these types of places. And I wanted to place Black people within these spaces as a way of understanding forces that would continually create a class of workers who were willing to accept low-wage jobs with limited benefits and little opportunity for advancement. And one of the most important and significant things that I've learned in this journey in my study of African American history is that understanding the neighborhood and its continued creation as undeveloped space is key to understanding the perpetuation of Black folks at the bottom of the socioeconomic order. You asked me why there was no movement in medium household income over 30 years, because there's been no movement in the positionality of Black people in the economy in over 30 years. And there's been no movement of Black people in the economic economy over 30 years because neighborhoods matter. They matter. If you look at the conditionality of the neighborhoods, they explain the disparities in health outcomes. They explain the disparities in income. And they explain why the wealth gap can never, ever be closed because of the structural barriers that create it. So I hope my work around the commission centers neighborhoods, because neighborhoods are ground zero in the exploitation of Black people. You cannot change the conditionality of Black folks without transforming the neighborhoods in which they live. And you cannot transform the neighborhoods in which they live without fundamentally altering the models that we are using to develop and redevelop those neighborhoods. Buffalo, New York has failed to develop that. They have failed to develop that. They have failed to put together any type of comprehensive neighborhood planning for any neighborhood in the city. And without comprehensive planning and the resources to transform plans into actual developments, nothing ever changes. So if we put the neighborhood at the center and begin to understand how do we transform the neighborhood and the rest of the communities, because you cannot transform the neighborhoods without transforming the way the city operates and functions, and without changing some very basic values. So in my belief, in this century, systemic structural racism is embedded. The ground zero is the neighborhood for systemic structural racism. And it is there that the fight for Black liberation and freedom will take place over the next 100 years.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Taylor. Appreciate those words. I'm going to give you all a minute to think of 1 to 3 words, because this is the last question. 1 to 3 words that encapsulate your vision for Buffalo, specifically Black people here in Buffalo. Just take a moment, and while they're taking a moment to think of those words, we did have some comment cards at the registration table, and if you have a comment or question that you want recorded by the commission, it's really important you fill those out. If you have a comment or question for this panel, we prefer if we start with those cards. If not, we will do our best to take a few questions or comments, mostly questions, from the audience, because we do have limited time here in this beautiful public institution, the library, which closes on time because we have budget to pay the people until the building is supposed to close, is my understanding. That is not word from the library, but that's how I believe libraries function. So we're gonna try to wrap up with 1 to 3 limited words on the vision you have for Buffalo, for Black folk in Buffalo, and then we will do our best to take a few questions, and then we will try to wrap this up by 6:30. We are doing the impossible, but we're gonna move forward with it. I'm gonna start here with you, Naila.
I'll say it's kind of encapsulating everything, and the work that I do is moving Black joy, quite literally moving, and what does that look like for us in our neighborhoods, but also moving to a space that we can financially sustain ourselves and also have the opportunities to financially sustain ourselves for joy.
Moving, thank you, Dr. Williams.
I have to say cautiously optimistic. I've been here long enough to see the impact of activism, how my generation created, for example, African American Studies departments, how we pushed to get more representation of people of color in government, and we backslid. So I'm cautiously optimistic that a new generation will come and affect change. And we'll continue to work, obviously, until we can.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
I've always been optimistic. I'm so optimistic I can believe I can eat the chicken scratching on my grave. Having said that, to me, my vision, and I believe our task, is to radically reconstruct the neighborhoods in which we live. To me, that's the secret to the way we move forward. And that's where we have to place our imagination, our energy, and our focus.
Thank you. Thank you. Bring us home, Dr. Torrey.
Well, as a fantastic commissioner, I know, amen. We want well and great. Now, I want to make sure, as I think about this commission, that we want to make sure that history deserves to be told accurately, it deserves to be told constantly, and it deserves to be told with the goal to make a better society in the future. And that's the same way I think about Buffalo right now. My vision is that this is a thriving Black community. My vision is that it's a hopeful Black community, and my vision is that it's a passionate Black community, because that passion will help to get you through the hope, and it will get you to that thriving space. But you gotta be able to believe in that it's there. So hopefully, as a mission, we can help grow some of the belief.
Good, good. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. I see a hand there, and I see there's a microphone right before you. As you come to the microphone,
Real quick, do you know who Jack Sharp was?
what a precise question. Do you know who Jack Sharp
This
was?
is for Dr. Taylor. Jack Sharp was a man who was on the radio, and he fought against the community of Audubon because it was going to be integrated. Remember that in your thing. But I have two things I want to talk about. I'm one of the
We have time for maybe one.
Well, I'm only going to say,
Okay.
I'm the original board of the Afro-American Historical Association. It's the only one in New York that's chartered by the state. And also, I'm on the board of the Afro-Americans in New York Life and History. The young lady talked about dance or something. You ever heard of Neil?
Yes.
We've written stuff on him. We've written stuff, R.D., his first run for mayor. We've written about Monroe. Monroe was the man, he was it. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for that, both your questions and your comment. I saw another hand here, and depending on how this goes, you might be able to take one more. So if you're burning and bubbling, bring it to life succinctly, but we do have one here. Oh, the microphone is gone. Here, just take mine. Thank you.
What impact will the commission have on these negative socio-economic outcomes for American freedmen?
Thank you. For American
Freedmen.
freedmen. Okay, Dr. Torrey looks like he has something to say. So did you all hear the question?
Repeat it for me one more time. It's about negative economic outcomes for American freedmen.
American freedmen, yes. What impact do you think this commission might have for that? And go ahead and tell us what you're talking about, American freedmen. I can go ahead and say, I don't know.
Well, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but she's our local representative of the U.S. Freedmen's Project, which is a group that's actively trying to pursue, what is that? Is it the actual hour? Is it actual? Is it? Well, they're trying to rectify injustice that have been done to formerly enslaved people across the nation, and they have some status near New York. At least with regards to the actual economic disenfranchisement we're facing, I'm not entirely sure that the commission itself has that within its scope as a way to try to respond or recommend. What I do know is that that's a key concern, is trying to make sure that part of that telling the history accurately of what's happening with Black people is that people know exactly where the lines have been drawn, where the issues have been, and more importantly, where the resources have not been placed. Ideally, we can respond in some sort of way to try to uplift that those places need resources in certain sorts of ways, or that harms that have been done need to get responded to in some sort of way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We do have another question here. We're gonna hold that one.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Eva Doyle. Most people call me Mother Doyle.
As they should.
Because I'm one of the matriarchs of the Black community. I'm a historian, and I have written over 4,000 articles on Black history, especially local Black history. This was my first book. It's 41 years old. It's called Buffalo's Black Community. I teach our youth our history. We have to start teaching our young people so they grow up with this history. And I write about the little known facts of Black history in my column, I Am History, which is 44 years old. It has never missed a week, being published in Buffalo for 44 years, and it's in the Criterion, and the Criterion newspaper is 100 years old. I want to say this. When I published this book, I was teaching first grade, and I went to the library, and there was no book about Buffalo's Black community. So I wrote my own book, and since then, I've written 12 books. But let me say this. I'm an elder. give a scholarship to 6 outstanding students. I created this scholarship 14 years ago in honor of my late husband. His name was Romeo Doyle Muhammad. I had no money. I used my own funds. So in 2 weeks, these 6 students will get a check from me out of my own funds. You have to be willing to sacrifice, give up something to change our community. And like Dr. Tatum said, there's no money in being a historian. This is my last statement. I consider the entire Western New York area my classroom. So come into my classroom.
Thank you so much. I like to be adopted, so definitely thank you, Mother Doyle. And I was just watching a video of you reading your book on my way here. So I am doubly blessed to see you in the flesh and to see you here with us, mothering us even in this space. Again, I want to thank Dr. Torrey, Dr. Taylor, Dr. Williams, and forthcoming doctor? Yeah. Speak, which one? Speak.
Boss lady, just call her boss lady.
Boss lady, I'm sorry. I'm very grateful, and we are all grateful for your wisdom here. It is the hour, and always on time, the Secretary of State, Robert Rodriguez. I looked down before, didn't see him, and he just appeared. But I just want to have him come and give us closing remarks and officially adjourn this meeting. Again, even if your comment didn't make its way out of your mouth in this moment, those comment cards always make their way into our conversations and meetings. So please do leave them on the back if you did not have time, and I'm handing it over now to our chair, Secretary Rodriguez.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Buffalo Erie County Library for hosting us today. They have been wonderful hosts. And thank you all, and to all the members of the commission for being here, for your presence. The public is an integral part of this ongoing conversation and collaboration. So I look forward to a meaningful conversation over the next few weeks, months, and for the years to come. But as I mentioned, the most important part of this conversation and dialogue is public engagement, speaking and hearing from you, the public. Our commissioners, as you have seen in our various meetings, are amazing. Amazing doctors and scholars with tremendous knowledge. But in order for this commission to truly be successful, we need to hear the voice of the people. It has to shine through and ring through in the work and in the meetings that we're having here. So I just wanted to thank you for that participation. You have also an opportunity to give us feedback and comments regarding your ideas online. Please fill out an index card here today. And for those who are participating virtually, feel free to send us your thoughts and your ideas on our website. And continue to check our website for updates on our work and on future meetings. So with that, thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Send us your comments. And we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. Good evening.